A massive skilling update just hit RuneScape, and for the first time in years, we've got 8 brand new Invention perks. On top of that, 2 skilling main hands just dropped, and a lot of this new stuff is extremely interesting and powerful, and it can completely change the way that you'll want to train your skills. I've tested all the new stuff, so let's get into it. For starters, let's talk about components. Offcut components are made from disassembling flat packs, hunter gear, and furs, but as an uncommon component, you can also get them from scavenging if that's more your speed. I found the best way to get them was disassembling marble flat packs. The marble is pretty expensive, but you get a guaranteed 2 components per disassemble. Manufactured components, on the other hand, are rare, and they come from disassembling wooden ore boxes, talismans, primal gear, necroplasm, and smithing equipment. And I found the best thing to disassemble for these was high-level necroplasm. And while it used to only cost 1 necroplasm per disassemble, it was nerfed and now it costs 20 per at the same output. Despite the early bird bonus, this still feels like a really good way to get manufactured components. Now that we've gone over the comps themselves, let's go through all of the new perks. I'll show you my testing and let you know what I think about every single one. The first perk we're going to talk about is Scraps, which allows you to gain 1 additional resource when a material cache is depleted or a tree is felled. For woodcutting, this isn't really a big deal, especially considering the highest level trees in the game don't fall very often. But for archaeology, if you're gathering from material caches that sometimes only last a few resources, this is actually a really significant boost, and it's something I'm going to be using on my Iron Man. To me, this is a real sleeper pick because even though it doesn't sound that strong, these extra materials are going to add up, and in my testing, I found I was getting about 10% extra materials in total with this. It's also worth mentioning that if you're using this perk, you don't want to use Refined or the Resourceful Auras, as they both make material caches last longer, and you want them to last as little as possible to get the most out of it. Next up, we've got the Careless Perk. Here's what it does. When you're mining, increase your damage by 2% per rank at the cost of reducing your stamina by an additional 10% per rank. While smithing, Careless increases your base progress per strike by 10% per rank at a cost of reducing your heat by an additional 10% per rank. For smithing, this perk is quite frankly absolutely ridiculous, as it's literally a 50% boost to your smithing progress. And you might think that this is a trade-off for training smithing actively because you are going to lose heat a lot faster. But you'd be wrong. It's also a boost to AFK smithing because you can grab a full invent of +5 gloves or boots and burial them all without your heat running out at any point. Smithing, which was already one of the fastest skills in all of RuneScape, just got about 50% faster. On the mining side of the coin, Careless 5 is going to provide a 10% boost to mining damage, and so long as you're clicking or using stone spirits to keep your stamina high, there's no negative to this. And to make matters even better, this perk works at the gate of Elidness to make your kills even more consistent. At the gate, I wasn't quite able to guarantee a 1-tap even with max boosts, but I was getting one like 90% of the time. On the surface, this also looks like an active mining training boost, but that's also not the case because the 50% reduced stamina bar doesn't matter at all if you're using stone spirits and a perfect juju mining potion. In doing this, your stamina bar will constantly reset itself, so you'll be able to enjoy a flat 10% damage boost when training actively or AFKing. But we're also not done yet with the mining perks, because there's also another new perk called Explosive that gives you another 20% additional mining damage when you're mining core ores. The mention of core ores here is important because this will not work at a boss like the Gate of Elidness. The downside to this perk is that while it's active, you will no longer get any rock opportunities, which are the gold shining rocks that you can click on for additional progress. I was able to combo Careless 4 with Explosive to get a massive 28% boost to my mining, which is kind of extremely strong. Although I will mention, if you want to train mining actively, you may want to go the rock opportunity route instead of using Explosive. It should be a little bit better so long as you're paying attention. Next up, we've got the Oblivious Perk, which is a genuine game changer for anyone who's wanting to pickpocket. Oblivious prevents you from being stunned while pickpocketing in exchange for you taking triple damage. With this perk, gone are the days of getting interrupted all the time while thieving, and now, as long as you don't run out of life points, pickpocketing can be AFK'd almost infinitely. It's worth noting that some thieving targets hit harder than others, with the rogue captain blasting me for a 3k hit. But on the other side of the coin, we have dwarf traders, which probably haven't been rebalanced in a decade. Even with triple damage taken, these guys are hitting me a whopping 30 damage every time they catch me, meaning they can now be AFK'd for over 1.3 million base experience per hour. Overall, this perk is extremely convenient at a lot of different levels, but it may not be the most balanced in some areas. But one thing's for sure, I'm personally really happy that it doesn't feel like I need to use an aura and every single thieving buff at the same time in order to do any pickpocketing. This should be extremely nice, especially for low-level players or players that don't have all the buffs, and considering my lowest stat on my group Iron Man is Thieving, I'm definitely going to be taking the Oblivious perk for a spin. One other thing I tested out with the Oblivious Perk is this does not work to prevent you from getting stunned and caught when training Thieving in Prifdinus. So the dream of infinitely AFKing for super potions and porters in Prif is unfortunately not alive. For these next two perks, you're going to want to get your runecrafting preset ready. For starters, let's talk about Wild Runes. This perk gives you a 1% chance per rank of providing a random assortment of runes in place of what you'd have gained at the altar you were using. Experience remains the same, but the number of runes crafted will be 2. This means if this activates while you're running at the air altar, with your multiplier absolutely maxed out, you are going to get a literal shipment of thousands of runes all the way up to and including 5 runes. Unfortunately though, at a 1 in 20 chance of activating, it's extremely inconsistent, and for most players, you're not likely to spend too much time running low-level runecrafting altars. At any high-level altar, this perk going off is going to completely ruin your yield. It might be okay if you're training with the Runic Attuner and for Iron Elemental runecrafting, but I was pretty underwhelmed by this perk, especially considering you're only going to get a couple activations per hour. I also need to mention that this perk doesn't do anything for Necromancy runes. Outside of a couple very niche, very unique instances, I'm going to rename Wild Runes to Mild Runes. It honestly isn't very good. Fortunately though, while Wild Runes is pretty underwhelming as a perk, Polishing is absolutely busted, as it offers a 3% chance per rank when crafting runes to upgrade your full amount of runes to the next tier. This works for regular and necromancy runes, which means you could get a shipment of bone runes while you're crafting spirit runes. Or far more interestingly, what this means is that the best way in RuneScape to make soul runes is now not to make soul runes at all, it's to make blood runes. This perk is completely insane, especially because when it upgrades the runes, it gives you the lower level altars modifier. So as an example, when you get an activation when you're crafting spirit runes, you're going to get an instant 1,400 bone runes in your invent. Taking a break from runecrafting, let's take a look at the Naturalist's Perk, which gives a 0.5% chance per rank to give a random skilling buff on gather for woodcutting, fishing, and mining. I'll throw the buffs on screen because there are an absolute ton of them, but in general, this perk is pretty good, especially when training with methods that have a high gather rate. As an example, when I'm fishing Ghostly Souls or fishing at the Croesus area, I had a really solid uptime for getting a random deep sea fishing buff. At the same time, when I went swarm fishing, I barely noticed this perk at all. When you're gathering fast, this perk is good and seems worthwhile alongside the Honed perk for additional yield and experience. I also thought it was really interesting that while you have a buff active, you're still eligible to roll again for additional buffs, so there were points that I had 2 fishing buffs going at the same time. There was also a point where I rolled a buff that was already active, and instead of what I expected it to do, which was to reset the timer to 1 minute, it actually added the time, so I got to keep the same buff for a full 2 minutes. Pretty cool and pretty well thought out as well. The last 2 perks we're going to go over today are archaeology related. The first one is called Preservationist, and it offers a 1% chance per rank of gaining a fully restored artifact instead of a damaged one on excavation. This perk on the surface seems extremely good, especially for Iron Men, but in actual testing, I'm not completely sold. When you pull this fully restored artifact, 1, it doesn't grant you any experience at all, and on top of this, it also doesn't count for your restoration count. Because of this, it's not really great to use if you're working your way up your qualifications, and it's also not good to use if you care about your experience per hour. Conversely though, it's a solid pick if you're training archaeology for collection logs, tetra compasses, or if you're trying to gain artifacts to disassemble for invention components. If it were me though, and I was choosing between this and Impsoul on my Iron Man, there's a very valid argument for both, but I'm probably personally going to go with Impsoul to save myself some porters. The last archaeology perk is called Hasty, and it grants a 1% chance per rank to give you triple excavation progress, at the cost of not receiving a material at all. This is going to be absolutely unreal for main accounts who want a power level archaeology or power level things like tetra compasses, and especially when combined with the Soma relic, you're going to be getting artifacts like nobody's business. At the same time, on an Iron Man, you probably want to avoid this one, as the faster you pull an artifact, the fewer materials you're going to get. And in general, the materials are always the thing that's hardest to get on Iron Man. But wait, there's more. With new runecrafting and thieving perks, we also need a way to use them, so we've got 2 brand new runecrafting and thieving main hands, the Binding Rod for runecrafting and the Pickpocketing Bag for thieving. These both require level 22 invention to discover and 71 in their respective skills to use. They're very similar to the other low-level invention main hands like the Hammertron and the Pyromatic in the sense that they don't actually offer any specific boosts outside of the fact that they each have 2 open perk slots, allowing you to use the brand new perks. Both of these main hands also have upgrades. For runecrafting, you've got the Crystal Binding Rod that requires level 81 to use, and it's going to grant you an additional 5% runes whenever you're runecrafting. On the thieving side, you've got the Mushroomy Pickpocketing Bag, which grants an additional 5% chance to increase auto pickpocketing speed by 0.6 seconds. For this one, if you're planning on AFKing Thieving with the new Oblivious Perk, you're probably going to want to get one. In terms of cost, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how reasonable these are to make. I think the Pickpocketing Bag could easily end up being a meta way to train low-level Invention on an Iron Man, and in general, none of these upgrades felt like too much of a grind to get. I love that these are an addition to the core Invention skill, so you don't have a random unlock task that feels like a chore in order to use the new things. Some of the perks are better thought out than others, and I'm not sure about the perks that everyone expected to be boosts to active gameplay all working out really well for AFK, but in general, there was a lot of cool stuff to play around with today. I'd love to see more updates like this in the future, especially with all the recent discussion about the economy and item values. Invention is a great way to sink excess items while giving players additional fun, interesting, and mostly well thought out perks and tools to use. With that said, that's a rundown of the Augmented Runecrafting and Thieving skilling update. I really hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and I'll see you next time. Oh yeah, and one more thing. Let me know if you want me to cover more updates like this one. I'm super open to it, but it's definitely a new thing for my channel.